You know, at 70 years old, I never thought I'd have to fight for my own home. But when my own children looked me in the eye and said, "You're just a guest here now," well, that's when I decided to stop paying the bills and let the bank call them first. And let me tell you, it was the most liberating thing I'd done in decades. My name is Margaret, and this is the story of how I reclaimed my life when everyone thought I was too old to matter anymore. It started 3 years ago when my husband Robert passed away after 45 years of marriage. We'd built our dream home together in 1978. A beautiful colonial with a wraparound porch in the suburbs of Nashville. Every corner of that house held our memories, from the kitchen where we'd have our morning coffee to the garden where Robert grew his prized tomatoes. After the funeral, I was devastated, but I was managing. I had my routine, my book club, my volunteer work at the animal shelter. Sure, I was lonely, but I was independent. I'd been paying all the bills myself for months already since Robert had gotten too sick to handle the finances. The mortgage was nearly paid off, just 18 months left. I had my Social Security, Robert's pension, and some savings. Not wealthy by any means, but comfortable enough. That's when my daughter Lisa and my son Michael decided I needed help. They started showing up more often, which at first I appreciated. But then came the comments. "Mom, this house is too big for you. Mom, you shouldn't be driving at night. Mom, what if something happens and nobody's here?" They meant well, I thought. They were worried about their old mother living alone in this big house. Lisa was the first to suggest I sell the house and move into a retirement community. Think of all the friends you'd make, Mom. And no more worrying about maintenance or yard work. But this wasn't just a house. It was my home. Every room told a story. The living room where we'd hosted Christmas mornings. The dining room where we'd celebrated every birthday and anniversary. The master bedroom where Robert and I had whispered our dreams to each other in the dark. I told them no, politely but firmly. I wasn't ready to give up my independence, and I certainly wasn't ready to give up my home. That's when things started to change. Their visits became more frequent, but also more critical. "Mom, you left the stove on. Mom, you forgot to lock the front door. Mom, you paid this bill twice." Some of these things were true. I'm human, and yes, sometimes I made mistakes. But they started treating every little slip-up like evidence that I was losing my mind. Michael, my youngest, was particularly persistent. He's a financial advisor, so he kept talking about maximizing my assets and ensuring my future security. He brought spreadsheets to our conversations, for crying out loud. Charts showing how much money I could have if I sold the house and invested the proceeds. "Mom, you're house rich but cash poor. This doesn't make financial sense." But what he didn't understand, what neither of them understood, was that this house wasn't just an asset to me. It was my sanctuary, my independence, my connection to the life I'd built with their father. When you've lived somewhere for over 40 years, when you know exactly which floorboard creaks and which window sticks, when you can navigate to the bathroom in complete darkness, that's not just a house, that's home. The breaking point came last spring. I'd had a minor incident. I fell in the garden while planting my annual flowers. Nothing serious, just scraped my knee and bruised my ego. But a neighbor saw it happen and called Lisa, thinking she was being helpful. Within an hour, both my children were at my door, treating me like I was made of glass. That's when they presented what they called the solution. Michael had done some research and found a lovely assisted living facility about 20 minutes away. "It's not a nursing home, Mom," Lisa assured me. "It's more like a fancy apartment complex. You'd have your own place, but there would be people around if you needed help. And they have activities, and meals if you don't want to cook." I listened to their presentation, and that's exactly what it felt like. A business presentation. They had brochures, cost breakdowns, testimonials from other families. They'd already visited the place, already spoken to the administrators. They had it all figured out, except for one small detail. They hadn't asked me what I wanted. When I said no again, that's when their approach changed completely. They started talking about my safety and their peace of mind. They began making decisions for me without asking. Lisa took my car keys one day, claiming she needed to run an errand, and then never gave them back. Mom, you really shouldn't be driving anymore. What if you have an accident? Michael started going through my mail, helping me organize my finances. He noticed that I'd been a little behind on a couple of bills. Nothing major, just the usual juggling that comes with living on a fixed income. But he treated it like I was on the verge of financial ruin. See, Mom? This is exactly what we're worried about. You can't keep track of everything anymore. The final straw came on a Tuesday in June. I woke up to find Lisa in my kitchen, not cooking breakfast or making coffee, but packing up my dishes. Mom, we found you the perfect place, she announced, as if she was giving me a gift. We can move you in next weekend. I'm just getting a head start on packing some of your things. I stood there in my nightgown, watching my daughter wrap my wedding china in newspaper, and something inside me just snapped. Put those down, I said quietly. She looked up, surprised by my tone. I said, put them down. These are my dishes, in my house, and you have no right to pack them. Lisa straightened up, and I could see the frustration in her face. Mom, we're trying to help you. You can't stay here anymore. It's not safe. Michael and I have already put down a deposit on the apartment. The moving truck is scheduled for Saturday. That's when she said it. The words that would change everything between us. I asked her how they could make these decisions without even asking me. And Lisa looked at me with this mixture of pity and impatience and said, Mom, this isn't really your decision anymore. You're getting older, and Michael and I are responsible for you now. You're just a guest here now until we can get you settled somewhere appropriate. A guest. In my own home. The home I'd lived in for over 40 years. The home Robert and I had saved for and planned and built our life in. The home where I'd raised these two ungrateful children who now saw me as nothing more than an aging burden to be managed. I looked at my daughter. This woman I'd brought into the world. Nursed through every childhood illness. Supported through her divorce. Helped with her own children. And I realized that somewhere along the way, she'd stopped seeing me as her mother. And started seeing me as her responsibility. Not a person with feelings and desires and the right to make my own choices. But a problem to be solved. Get out, I said quietly. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. I said, get out. Both of you. Get out of my house. Mom, you're being unreasonable. Get out! I screamed, and I hadn't raised my voice like that in years. This is my house, and I'm not a guest here. I'm the homeowner. I'm the one whose name is on the deed, and I'm telling you to leave. Now. They left, but not before Lisa turned around at the door and said, Fine, Mom, but don't come crying to us when you can't handle things on your own anymore. We were trying to help you, but if you want to be stubborn, that's your choice. After they left, I sat in my kitchen, and I cried. Not just from anger, though I was furious, but from the heartbreak of realizing that my own children saw me as incompetent, as a burden, as someone whose wishes didn't matter anymore just because I'd reached a certain age. But then something else happened. As I sat there surrounded by the boxes Lisa had packed, I started to get mad. Really mad. Not the kind of anger that makes you cry or yell, but the cold, determined kind of anger that makes you think clearly and plan carefully. If they thought I was just a guest in my own home, if they thought they could make decisions for me without my consent, if they thought that turning 70 meant I'd lost the right to control my own life, then I was going to show them exactly what this guest was capable of. The first thing I did was call the assisted living facility and cancel the reservation they'd made for me. The administrator was confused. Apparently, Michael had been very convincing when he toured the facility and put down the deposit. He said his mother was very excited about moving in. She told me. I explained that his mother was quite capable of speaking for herself, and his mother was not interested. I also made sure they understood that Michael had no legal authority to make decisions for me. Next, I called the moving company and canceled that too. Then I unpacked every single box Lisa had packed, putting everything back exactly where it belonged. It took me 3 days and my back ached, but every dish I unwrapped, Every photograph I returned to its place, every book I put back on its shelf was a small act of rebellion. But I wasn't done. Not even close. See, during all their helpful financial planning, Michael had somehow gotten himself added to several of my accounts. Just for emergencies, Mom. He'd said, just so I can help if something happens. I'd agreed because it seemed reasonable at the time. But now I realized it was part of their plan to gradually take control of my life. I went to the bank and removed him from every single account. The bank manager, a nice young woman named Jennifer, was very understanding. "I see this more often than you'd think," she told me quietly. "Adult children who mean well, but start overstepping boundaries. You have every right to control your own finances, Mrs. Thompson." While I was there, I also made sure my will and power of attorney documents were up to date and very clear about my wishes. I wasn't angry enough to disinherit my children entirely, but I made sure there was no ambiguity about who was in charge of my life while I was still living it. But here's where my plan got really interesting. See, Michael and Lisa had been so focused on getting me to sell the house that they'd never really looked at the details of how the household finances worked. Robert had always handled the bills, and after he died, I'd taken over. But during the months when they'd been helping me, Michael had started taking on more and more of that responsibility. He'd insisted on being the one to deal with the mortgage company, the utility companies, the insurance. "It's easier if everything goes through one person, Mom," he'd said. "And you know how these companies can be. They're more likely to work with someone who understands financial terminology." What Michael didn't realize was that while he'd been dealing with the companies, I'd been the one actually paying the bills. The accounts were still in my name. The money was still coming from my bank account. But he'd positioned himself as the contact person for everything. So when Lisa told me I was just a guest in my own home, I decided to stop acting like the hostess. If I was just a guest, then I certainly shouldn't be responsible for paying for everything, should I? I stopped paying the mortgage. I stopped paying the electric bill, the gas bill, the water bill, the phone bill, the internet, the trash service, the lawn service, everything. Every bill that came in went straight into a drawer, unopened. Now I'm not stupid. I knew this would eventually catch up with me, but I also knew it would catch up with Michael first, since he was the contact person for most of these accounts. I figured I had at least a month, maybe 2, before things got serious. And I was curious to see just how responsible my children felt when the companies started calling them instead of me. It took exactly 3 weeks. Michael called me on a Tuesday morning, and I could hear the panic in his voice. "Mom, I just got a call from the mortgage company. They said you're behind on payments, and the electric company called yesterday. What's going on?" "Oh," I said innocently. "I thought since you and Lisa were making all the decisions about my life now, you'd want to handle the bills too. After all, I'm just a guest here." There was a long silence. Then, "Mom, you can't just stop paying your bills. This is serious. They could foreclose on the house." "I know," I said calmly. "Terrible thing, losing your home. I'd hate for that to happen to me. I guess someone should probably pay those bills." "Mom, this isn't funny. You could ruin your credit. You could lose everything." "Michael," I said, and my voice was steady and clear. "I'm 70 years old. I'm not planning on taking out any more loans or buying any more houses. My credit score is the least of my concerns right now. What concerns me is that my own children decided I was incompetent to make decisions about my own life." Another silence. Then he tried a different approach. "Look, Mom, maybe we came on a little strong, but we're worried about you. This house is a lot of responsibility, and living alone at your age." "At my age?" I interrupted. "Michael, I'm 70, not 90. I'm in good health. I have all my mental faculties, and I've been managing just fine. What I can't manage is having my adult children treat me like I'm a child." "We don't treat you like a child. You took my car keys without asking. You made reservations at a retirement home without consulting me. You went through my mail and my finances. Lisa packed my belongings like I was being evicted. And then she told me I was just a guest in my own home. How exactly is that not treating me like a child?" I could hear him talking to someone in the background, probably Lisa. Then he came back on the line. "Okay, Mom, what do you want us to do?" "I want you to apologize. I want you to acknowledge that I have the right to make my own decisions about my life. And I want you to promise that you'll consult with me before making any plans that affect me, instead of just assuming you know what's best. And then you'll pay the bills?" "Michael, I never stopped being able to pay the bills. I stopped choosing to pay them. There's a difference. That afternoon, both Michael and Lisa came to my house. They looked uncomfortable, which was exactly how I'd hoped they'd look. We sat in my living room in my house, and we had the conversation we should have had months ago. Lisa started. "Mom, I owe you an apology. When I said you were just a guest here, that was wrong. This is your home, and it was cruel of me to say that." "It wasn't just cruel," I told her. "It was insulting. Lisa, I understand that you worry about me, but I'm still your mother. I'm still a competent adult, and I still have the right to live my life the way I choose." Michael jumped in. "But Mom, what if something happens? What if you fall and can't get help? What if you get sick? We live 20 minutes away. Anything could happen in 20 minutes. Michael, anything could happen to you too. You're not exactly young anymore yourself. You're 52 years old. Should your children start making decisions for you because something might happen?" That gave him pause. "That's different." "How is it different? Because I'm older? Because I'm a woman? Because Dad isn't here anymore to validate that I'm still a person worth consulting?" We talked for 3 hours. Really talked, maybe for the first time since Robert died. They told me about their fears, that they'd lose me the way they'd lost their father, that something would happen and they wouldn't be there, that they'd regret not taking action if I got hurt or sick. I understood their fears, but I also helped them understand mine. That I'd lose my independence, my dignity, my sense of self if I let them wrap me in bubble wrap and put me away somewhere safe. We reached some compromises. I agreed to get one of those medical alert necklaces, the kind where you can push a button if you fall. I agreed to check in with them every couple of days, just a quick phone call to let them know I was okay. I agreed to be more careful about things like driving at night or climbing on ladders to change light bulbs. In return, they agreed to treat me like an adult. They agreed to ask before offering help, and to accept it when I said no. They agreed that any major decisions about my life would be made by me, with their input if I wanted it, but not with their override. Most importantly, they agreed that this was my home, and I would live here as long as I was able and wanted to. The next day, I paid all the bills. Every single one, including the late fees. It cost me an extra $200, but it was worth every penny for the lesson it taught my children about taking me for granted. But the story doesn't end there, because in the month that followed, something beautiful happened. Once Michael and Lisa stopped seeing me as a problem to be solved, they started seeing me as their mother again. Our relationship, which had become tense and transactional, became warm again. Michael started coming by on weekends, not to check up on me, but to spend time with me. We'd work in the garden together, or he'd help me with small projects around the house. But he'd ask first, "Mom, would you like some help with that?" Instead of just taking over. Lisa and I started having our mother-daughter time again. She'd come over on Thursday evenings, and we'd cook dinner together and watch old movies. She'd tell me about her job, her kids, her dating life since her divorce. I'd tell her about my book club, my volunteer work, the neighborhood gossip. We were mother and daughter again, not caregiver and patient. The funny thing is, I actually did end up making some changes to make their lives easier and mine safer. I hired a cleaning service to come twice a month because honestly, keeping this big house spotless was getting to be a lot of work. I signed up for grocery delivery for the heavy items, though I still enjoyed going to the store for fresh produce and the social interaction. I even visited that assisted living facility they'd picked out, just out of curiosity. It was actually quite nice, and I could see why they thought I'd like it. The people were friendly, the activities looked engaging, and the apartments were lovely. But it wasn't home. Maybe someday when I'm truly unable to care for myself, I'll consider something like that. But that day isn't today. And more importantly, when that day comes, it will be my choice. The most surprising change was that I started making new friends and trying new things. Fighting for my independence had reminded me that I was still very much alive, still capable of growth and change and adventure. I joined a hiking group for seniors, started taking art classes at the community college, and even went on a solo trip to visit my sister in Colorado. Something I'd been afraid to do alone. I think my children were surprised to discover that their fragile mother was actually pretty resilient. When they stopped hovering over me, waiting for me to break, I had the space to show them how strong I still was. The mortgage is paid off now. Every month when I don't have to write that check, I think about how close I came to losing this house, this independence, this life I'd built. Not to foreclosure or financial hardship, but to well-meaning children who had forgotten that being older doesn't mean being helpless. I think about other women my age who might not have been as stubborn or as strategic as I was. Women who get steamrolled by adult children who think they know best. Women who end up in places they never wanted to be, having decisions made for them by people who love them but don't respect them. There's a difference between needing help and needing to be managed. There's a difference between being cared for and being controlled. And there's a big difference between someone offering support and someone assuming authority over your life. I learned that sometimes you have to fight for the right to be yourself, even when the people you're fighting are the ones you love most. I learned that age doesn't automatically equal incompetence, and that experience and wisdom still count for something. Most importantly, I learned that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. My children learned something too. They learned that their mother didn't become invisible or irrelevant just because she turned 70. They learned that love without respect isn't really love at all. It's management. And they learned that the strong woman who raised them was still strong. Still here. Still capable of surprising them. These days, when people ask me about aging, about what it's like to be in my 70s, I tell them it's a lot like being any other age, except that people expect less of you. They expect you to be grateful for any attention, to accept any decision made, for your own good, to quietly fade into the background of your own life. But I refuse to fade. I refuse to become a guest in my own existence. I'm still the author of my own story, and I plan to keep writing it for as long as I possibly can. The house is quiet now as I finish telling you this story. It's my quiet, in my house, filled with my memories and my choices. The garden needs weeding, the kitchen needs cleaning, and I have a dozen small tasks that need doing. And I'll do them myself, in my own time, in my own way. Because this is my home, I'm not a guest here, and I never will be. At 70 years old, I'm still learning, still growing, still fighting for the life I want to live. And if my own children ever forget that again, well, I've still got that drawer full of unpaid bills. Sometimes the most powerful thing an old woman can do is simply refuse to pay for her own erasure. The bank never did have to call them again, by the way. Funny how quickly people remember your competence when the lights might get turned off. Age might slow you down, but it doesn't have to shut you up. And sometimes, the most radical thing you can do is simply insist on being heard.